Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we've got a stack of sources that, well, they deal with some intensely complex and very difficult realities on the ground in the occupied West Bank.
That's right. And our goal here is to take a really impartial look at what's happening.
Exactly. Our mission isn't just to report the news. It's to cut through the noise and figure out why the data is suggesting the situation is escalating so dramatically right now.
We'll be drawing heavily on recent global reporting, but more importantly, on long-term, hard data from organizations like the UN's Humanitarian Office, OCHA, and some key Israeli rights groups.
Okay, let's unpack this. For you, the listener, our mission is to connect three things that might seem separate at first. The seasonal vulnerability of the Palestinian olive harvest, the shocking statistical spike in violent incidents, and the political environment that seems to be enabling it all.
Right. It's about seeing the human cost right alongside the political architecture.
So let's jump straight into that. The immediate, palpable human cost that's detailed in these materials.
The incidents just from this past Tuesday are visceral. We're talking about dozens of Israeli settlers launching what look like coordinated arson attacks.
And these weren't random. They were specifically targeting economic life.
Exactly. They burned a Palestinian warehouse in Beit Lid, set lorries on fire, and completely destroyed tents in a Bedouin village, Deir Sharaf.
And this timing, it's not a coincidence, is it? It's happening right during the olive harvest.
That is the critical point. The sources really emphasize that this annual harvest isn't just some cultural tradition.
It's a huge source of income.
A vital source of income for thousands of Palestinian families. So when they have to go out to their lands, especially lands near settlements, they become incredibly vulnerable.
That's the intersection right there, livelihood and conflict.
Yeah.
But to really understand this, we need a bit of groundwork. What's the legal and geographical status here?
The essential context is that the West Bank has been occupied since the 1967 Middle East War.
Right.
And today, the sources state that you have approximately 700,000 Jews living in about 160 settlements.
Alongside how many Palestinians?
An estimated 3.3 million. And what's crucial here, what's referenced again and again in our sources, is the legal consensus.
Which is?
That these settlements are considered illegal under international law. That foundational legal argument is what really fuels a lot of the international reaction to the violence we're seeing.
So now let's make that transition from the specific painful stories to the statistics that really define the scale of the problem.
Okay.
Because this is where it gets, really interesting. The sheer volume of incidents suggests this isn't just random friction.
Yeah.
It's an acceleration.
It absolutely is an acceleration, and it's driven by data. The UN's Humanitarian Office, OCHA, put out figures confirming that violent attacks by settlers last month.
That's October.
Yes, October. They were the highest they have ever recorded since they started collecting these specific metrics nearly 20 years ago.
The highest in 2 decades. I mean, if you were looking for proof that the dynamic on the ground has changed, that's it.
Precisely. In October alone, there were over 260 Israeli settler attacks that resulted in casualties or property damage.
Wow.
That averages out to 8 incidents a day.
And what about during the harvest specifically?
During that window, they documented about 150 attacks. Those led to injuries for more than 140 Palestinians and get this, the vandalism of more than 4,200 trees and saplings across 77 different villages.
So the damage isn't collateral, it's targeted economic warfare.
It seems to be.
Okay, so when you lay out those record-breaking numbers, the immediate question is, what's the legal consequence? Does this spike in violence lead to a spike in enforcement?
The data suggests the complete opposite. This is where we get into the structural issue of impunity.
Oh, right.
We have some really stark figures here from the Israeli rights group Yesh Din. They reviewed 7,701 police investigations.
Into what specifically?
Into offenses committed by Israelis against Palestinians in the West Bank between 2005 and 2024.
Okay, so a huge data set. And the outcome of that is the data point that changes everything.
It really does. Yesh Din reports that 93.8% of the cases that were actually concluded were closed with no indictment filed.
Let me just repeat that. Almost 94% of cases closed with no one being charged.
That's right.
So you have record-breaking violence on one side, and on the other, near total impunity. Does that high failure to prosecute rate basically act as an institutional green light for more attacks?
That is precisely the connection that these groups and international observers are making.
I can imagine.
The sources quote the UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator, Tom Fletcher, and he wrote that this failure to prevent or punish such attacks is inconsistent with international law.
So his conclusion is pretty blunt.
Very blunt. He says, impunity cannot prevail. Perpetrators must be held accountable. When the domestic legal system doesn't act, the environment just becomes permissive for this violence to continue and, as the OCHA data shows, to accelerate.
Which brings up a really important question. If the violence is accelerating and there are almost no consequences, why now? Is this escalation connected to a bigger political shift?
Well, the sources suggest that violence is running parallel with some very explicit official policy goals about territorial expansion.
Okay, and who's the central figure here?
The pro-settler Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich. He's in a unique position because he also holds ministerial responsibility for civilian affairs in the West Bank.
And his actions are leading to measurable expansion on the ground.
Without a doubt. The Israeli settlement watchdog Peace now reported an all-time yearly high for settlement tenders for 2025. We're talking 5,667 housing units.
Which would accommodate, what, 25,000 more residents?
About that, yes. And Smotrich has made it a priority to speed up planning and approvals, and he's actively working to retroactively legalize outposts that were set up even without previous Israeli government authorization.
But the fascinating thing here is that he's not hiding his intent. It's all out in the open.
Exactly. He has explicitly stated that his efforts are designed to, quote, de facto annex the West Bank.
And to prevent a Palestinian state from ever being established.
Fundamentally prevent it. So when you connect the dots, you have a political architect openly aiming for annexation, backed by record settlement construction, all happening alongside record-breaking rates of violence.
It's what the Palestinian Authority Minister Moyad Shaban called imposing a hostile environment. The policy seems connected to the pain on the ground.
It's hard to see it any other way based on these sources.
And to ground this, because the data can feel a bit abstract, the sources share some powerful stories about the human impact.
And those stories, especially the ones about targeting civilians and people trying to help, they really ground the data in human cost.
Like what?
Well, there's the tragic death of 13-year-old Issam Mwala. He died after inhaling tear gas fired by the IDF while his village was picking olives near the Aviatar settler outpost.
And it's not just the farmers who were targeted, right? It's anyone trying to document or assist.
That's right. There are reports of attacks on journalists, on volunteer paramedics.
Yeah.
There's even the story about the 77-year-old head of a Tel Aviv art college.
I saw that photo.
Yeah, photographed with blood streaming down his face after he just joined the harvest to help out.
It's not just confrontation either. There's also just straight-up economic sabotage.
Absolutely. In the village of Burin, settlers attacked Palestinian olive harvesters, stole bags of their olives, and, maybe most shockingly, even attacked an off-duty IDF reservist who was there helping the Palestinian farmers.
Wow. Now, despite this systemic impunity we've been talking about, there was some official condemnation after the big attacks on Tuesday. What did the Israeli officials say?
Israeli President Isaac Herzog called the events shocking and serious, though he did frame it as the fault of a handful of violent and dangerous individuals.
So few bad apples.
Essentially. He stressed that this kind of violence crosses a red line, and similarly, the IDF Central Command head, Major General Avi Bluth, called it unacceptable and said the directive to soldiers is clear: do not stand idly by.
And yet, the sources note that this big attack on Tuesday was a rare instance where law enforcement actually did act decisively and arrested 4 suspects.
That's the key.
That rarity, when you put it next to the 93.8% impunity figure, it just seems to reinforce the whole structural failure we were talking about.
It really highlights the disconnect, doesn't it? You have official condemnation on one hand, but systemic, consistent enforcement just doesn't follow. And that gap is where the de facto policy gets realized on the ground.
Okay, before we wrap this up, we have to quickly touch on a data point from the other source you shared. It's completely separate from all of this.
Right, just to be thorough.
The sources also noted an announcement from a Saudi real estate developer, Red Sea Global.
Yes, about the opening of its new luxury eco-resort destination, Alamala. It's a point of context on regional economic development, but yes, certainly not a driver for this deep dive.
Not at all. Okay, so if we connect this all back to the bigger picture.
The central narrative we've analyzed today is really one of collision, and it's a collision driven by policy.
A collision of what?
Of historic land conflict. The explicit political maneuvering towards de facto annexation, and these record-breaking violence statistics, all concentrated around a seasonal event like the olive harvest that directly hits Palestinian livelihoods.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The numbers really tell the story here. The escalation in the West Bank isn't just anecdotal.
It's statistically proven by the UN to be the highest recorded level of this kind
Yeah.
of violence in almost 2 decades.
And when you add in that 93.8% impunity rate from the rights groups, you really start to grasp the true scale of the lack of accountability and the devastating impact this has.
It's a powerful combination of data points.
So we'll leave you with this to think about. Given the Israeli finance minister's stated goal of de facto annexation, happening at the same time as the highest recorded surge in violence and settlement expansion, what does this pattern suggest to you about the immediate future of territorial control and, the possibility of a two-state solution? Something for you to consider long after we wrap up this deep dive.